Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Bracken. I'm the president of the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to the first in a series of webinars that we have had for the last couple of years with us and co-hosted with the NJM Insurance Group. We're very happy to bring that series back this year because it has been so popular and it really focuses on issues facing our small business community, of which there are many, and seem to be increasing by the day. So today's webinar will focus on the economic outlook for 2025, and we're doing this in partnership with the National Federation of Individual Businesses, which is also the NFIB, and its state director, Eileen Kane, who is a great partner of the state chamber and someone who we work very closely with and whose input we always value. So Eileen, would you like to say a few words about NFIB?
Yes, I managed to unmute myself. Well, good morning, and thank you, Tom. Yes, so I am Eileen Keene, and I am the state director of NFIB, the National Association of Independent Businesses. And it's a pleasure to work with, to host today with the chamber. We work very closely together in Trenton, fine team of lobbyists that the Chamber of Commerce has in New Jersey. And usually we are 100% aligned. Sometimes our issues are a little bit different because NFIB is smaller businesses. So our typical member in New Jersey is 10 employees or less. That's our median. So thanks again, Tom, and thanks for hosting this with us. And I look forward to an exciting dialogue.
Well, Eileen, we value your partnership, so thanks for doing this with us today. Also, partnering today is our co-host, NJM Insurance Group, who we've been having these small business webinars with for, I think this is our third year, and they've been extremely successful and well received by the business community. And they're a great corporate partner of ours and really one of the best corporate citizens in the state of New Jersey. And representing them today is Damon Johnson, Commercial Lines Distribution Director at NJM Insurance. Damon, would you like to say a few words about NJM?
Oh, sure. Thank you, Tom. NJM is super pleased to be an executive sponsor for the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce and Small Business webinar series. I want to thank the New Jersey Chamber for the opportunity to speak briefly this morning about NJM. We take pride in aligning the right coverages for our policyholders and providing an outstanding customer service experience and sharing profits in the form of dividends. So we're very proud of the fact that we were able to provide dividends pretty much each and every year of our existence. I would say that the Chamber has been an essential voice in the Garden State business for a long time and a vocal advocate in the corridors of the Capitol and Trenton. So we've been helping businesses just like the Chamber meet their insurance needs since 1913. We've been the largest writer of workers' compensation insurance in New Jersey for more than 75 years. And we wrote 2 lines of business historically and have expanded over the course of the last 5 years to include 3 additional lines of business, and expanded our footprint to include not only the New York and New Jersey states, but also Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Delaware, and Maryland. So now we operate out of 6 states, and we've become a regional operation and multi-lined as well. So we want to help policyholders grow, and in turn, we want to grow with them. And if you're not a New Jersey NJM business customer, I encourage you to visit the njm.com and to review the agent directory to get a free quote or contact us with any questions. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to turn it back over to Tom, who will serve as our moderator.
Damon, thanks. And thanks again to NJM for the ongoing partnership we've had with you and helping us bring some very vital messages to the business community that I think is resonated very well with that group of people. So today's program, we have 2 very well-versed professionals to present to you today. We have Holly Wade, who is the Executive Director of NFIB Research Center, and we have Tom Sullivan, Vice President, Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber. And what we are going to do is I'm going to turn it over to each of those two individuals, have them introduce themselves to you, have each of them say give you some information about their perspective on the economic outlook for small business in 2025, and then we will open it up for a Q&A. So, Holly, would you like to kick it off, please? Oh, you're muted, Holly.
You would think I'd be better at this by now. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you for the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce for hosting this webinar and inviting me to participate. Thank you, Damon, for your sponsorship of the webinar. This is a great opportunity to kick off 2025. Talking about small business, it's a whole different environment here. I run the research center here at NFIB in Washington, D.C., and I've been with NFIB for over 20 years, looking at small businesses, how they are operating in the economy, different economic conditions that they are working through, the challenges that impact them on a state and federal level, and also different types of operations. So we do a lot of surveys related to, how small business owners market their business, how they deal with taxes, regulatory issues, customers, why they started a business. So a lot of information produced in the research center to help us better understand small business owners, the impact that they have in the economy, how the economy is impacting them, and how they adjust to those variables. So we have roughly 300,000 members across the country. They span all industries and all sizes. Most of our members are employer businesses. So as Eileen said, range from about 5 to 10 employees is the average range for the size of businesses that we're looking at. But we do have about 10% that are non-employers, and also a few that are larger businesses in the hundreds, but not very many of them. So in the Research Center, we survey our members every month. We've been doing this for 51 years. Our chief economist, Bill Dunkelberg, he created this survey called the Small Business Economic Trends Survey to better assess the small business condition in different types of economies. So whether we're in an expanding economy or a contracting economy, the challenges that we have faced. So not surprisingly, the last 4 years have been interesting to see month to month how small businesses have adjusted through COVID, through the pandemic, and up until now, and seeing what the political environment, how they're responding to those changes in focus and policy. So I wanted to go through some of our findings within the survey. So our survey is roughly 30 questions, spanning kind of all different types of business operations for a small business. And again, we do this every month. We publish our survey the second Tuesday of every month at 6 a.m. So a few of us have to wake up pretty early on the second Tuesday of every month to talk about our findings. But our headline measure is our Small Business Optimism Index. Our Optimism Index is a compilation of 10 questions within the survey, and it's our headline measure of the health of the small business sector as we see it through our survey. So the average number for the Optimism Index over the 51 years of the survey is 98. So that's our baseline that we compare our index month to month. Is 98 is generally kind of an average good number over the last 51 years. And for the last 4 years, it has been far below that average. But in the last 2 months, we've seen a dramatic increase. So not surprisingly, the outcome of the elections for many states, but specifically for the federal government, the shift in Congress and the administration was a huge kind of burst of optimism for small business owners and how they see business conditions and expansion opportunities moving forward. So from October to November, we saw the largest increase in our index in the whole history of the survey. So there was a huge kind of surge in their positive expectations of how things will develop going forward into 2025. And then from November to December, we saw another surge in optimism where even more small business owners, after kind of thinking through and settling into what the environment, the political environment looks like, again, especially in Washington, D.C., that was far more supportive of small business owners' ability to operate their business. And those policy shifts and changes in policy focus were kind of squarely in where small business owners were hoping that those shifts would occur. So for the optimism index, again, we saw this huge surge in November. We saw another surge in December, and we're now at 105. So 105 historically is a very good environment in which small business owners feel optimistic about operating their business going forward. We also have another index, our uncertainty index. So this is a compilation of responses for a few questions related to whether small businesses don't know or are uncertain about how things are developing going forward, whether it's sales of expectations, good time to expand. So it's those answers that are uncertain or they don't know. And so the higher the uncertainty index, the worse it is for small business owners to move forward in feeling confident about how they're kind of moving through or deciding on different areas of business operations, whether it's, reinvesting in their business, hiring that next person. And so in October, we saw the index at 110. 110 was the highest level of uncertainty that we've ever seen in our survey. And we've since October seen a dramatic decline to 86. So now we're at 86 in December. But to put it in perspective, the average index for uncertainty is 68. So the lower the uncertainty index, the more certain small businesses are. We're still in an environment of uncertainty, but not nearly as bad as it was in October. So more small business owners, as the administration and Congress kind of pave the path going forward on fulfilling their objectives and what policy initiatives that they're looking to do in the next 100 days, we expect that our uncertainty index will continue to fall. So within our optimism index, one of the areas of huge shift was our question related to better business conditions. So small business owners saying that they think business conditions in the next 6 months will get worse or better versus worse. And from January 2024 to December 2024, we saw a 90-point swing. So it's a complete reversal of reaction to whether they think that going forward, the business climate will improve. Far more are saying that they expect business conditions to improve versus worsen, which was the complete opposite of where it was most of 2024. So that level of expectation of better business conditions, better time to expand businesses has kind of flowed through the rest of our survey related to sales expectations. We saw a huge increase in those expecting sales to improve over the next quarter. Also with hiring plans, to meet those sales expectations, we found that more small business owners are more actively pursuing hiring It's still a very tight labor market. So we know that it's frustrating for a lot of small business owners, especially in construction, transportation, some of the service industries and manufacturing, to fill those open positions. We have still a very high level of small business owners saying that they have an open position that they're not able to fill. But those more active hiring plans are increasing. And, along with that, we're seeing still a very high level of those business owners saying that they're going to increase competition, or sorry, not competition, compensation. So increasing compensation to retain and attract applicants for filling those open positions. And they feel more comfortable and confident in reinvesting their profits, their revenue into their business, and have it work for them, instead of thinking about what if taxes go up, what if the regulatory burden and those type of costs go up. And so the environment after the election has kind of allowed small business owners to refocus from what we see in our survey to reinvest in their business, reinvest in their employees, and expand with their expected increase in sales going forward into 2025. So those areas have been real helpful for us to see where small business owners are thinking about going, at least in the next 6 months here. But again, as I said, we still have a very tight labor market, and this is going to be a concern, a restricted area for many small business owners to expand their business. Even if they do see opportunities, it has been a difficult environment for many owners that we talk to, and through our survey, in kind of pursuing those areas of expansion that they've been looking to take advantage of over the last number of years. In 2022-23, the number of those businesses saying that, it's not a good time to expand, the business conditions aren't supportive of them, especially in 22, it was a bit of a kind of juxtaposition of, usually when those questions are kind of historically low, it's because we're going into a recession. It's because the economic conditions are starting to deteriorate and they're expecting lower sales volumes. However, for that time frame, a lot of it had to do with inflation and also not being able to find applicants to fill those open positions as the reasons that they didn't think it was a good time to expand going forward, or that business conditions were supportive, along with policies from the administration, the previous administration, and Congress being roadblocks as far as them going forward. But those two components were also driving. We're still seeing 1 in 5 small business owners say that inflation is their biggest problem in operating their business. Still high levels are saying that they're planning to increase prices, and that have increased prices. That's come down over the last 2 years, but still historically high levels of owners saying that they're planning to and actually increasing prices. And again, 1 in 5 still saying that inflation is their biggest problem in operating their business. Second to inflation, though, 19%, so almost another 1 in 5, are saying that labor quality is their biggest challenge in operating their business. So with 4.1% unemployment, still, which is very similar space as in 2017. It was 4.1% unemployment in December of 2017. And that was a real tight labor market then too. I think oftentimes we talk about just what it looked like in the last 4 years. And from 16 to 20, the conditions for hiring and retaining workers was a lot of pressure on small business owners then, and we're kind of in the same environment now. A little less pressure than a couple of years ago, but still in an environment where it is a challenge to expand. Right under that, for kind of their single most important problem, is 15% of them are saying taxes. So the tax environment on a federal level has stayed relatively the same since the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which has been helpful in supporting small business owners from not experiencing an increase in taxes. But for many in many states, those tax pressures have escalated. And so this is an area that I know the Chamber and NFIB, we are working, kind of hand in hand and as our biggest priority in getting those tax provisions that have been so helpful through TCJA preserved going forward. For most of those provisions that expire at the end of 2025, they impact those non-C Corp businesses. So the pass-through businesses, all of those who have benefited from the 20% small business deduction. And so the deduction, the individual income tax rates are set to expire. And this is one of the areas that we are, small business owners are expecting Congress to follow through with their promises of preserving those tax cuts, the administration to follow through with their promise of preserving those tax cuts. And this is our top priority for making sure that at the end of this year that we don't see a tax increase for the vast majority of small business owners, so that you all can do the things that, are most helpful for your business and in investing in your business, making those capital expenditures and making your business more productive. So we did see on the capital spending side, we have seen an increase from October to December in the percent of owners saying that they're looking to make a capital expenditure in the next 6 months, which is, again, one of those areas of feeling more confident about moving forward, being able to feel confident in investing in their business and not worrying so much about, at least on a federal level, the cost of increased regulatory burdens or higher taxes. So that's what we're seeing right now with the kind of the landscape, the economic landscape of the small business sector when it comes to our survey. This summer, we did look at, or we produced our small business problems and priority surveys that every 4 years we have a random sample of our members evaluate 75 issues, evaluating each one, and then we rank them on their average score. And not surprising, all of the tax kind of related provisions ranked high as a burden on small business. So that's certainly where we've focus most of our attention on a state and federal level. But interestingly, because I get asked all the time about financing and if there's credit constraints among small business owners, and from what we understood from that survey and also our monthly survey, is that interest rates are still a huge, huge problem for small business owners in absorbing those costs if they're looking to finance expansion opportunities or equipment or, other things, but also their customers in if they sell something that is typically financed as being kind of an impediment or a hurdle for business operations. And so, paying attention to the Fed and what they're looking to do to kind of ease those kind of higher costs, but it looks like they are stalling a bit because of the sticky inflation pressures that they see going forward into 2025. The number of rate cuts are likely not as many as we expected a couple months ago, and we will likely still experience higher levels of interest rates for small business owners and their consumers in the next year until that stickiness in inflation starts to deteriorate, which will be a great sign for small business owners, for consumers, and also for financing costs. So I will stop there. A lot of information, but I will hand it back over to Tom and Tom.
Holly, thank you very much. That's very enlightening. And I think there might be some questions after Tom makes his presentation. So we'll defer the questions until Tom is done. So Tom Sullivan, you want to introduce yourself and give some information on your perspective for small business?
Well, sure. You'll notice that when Holly was presenting, I was nodding a lot, much like my bobblehead dog, who's on the desk behind me. Holly and I are old dear friends, and I had a remarkable career at NFIB with Holly before serving in the administration and then coming over to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And it is a pleasure to talk with Holly frequently about what's going on with small business. We are kind of our gut check of each other. And it's great that Holly is with us today. Also, Tom, thank you for being such a great leader in the Chamber of Commerce world. Also a pleasure to be with my friend Eileen, the state director for NFIB. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we're the largest business advocacy organization in the world, represent about 3 million businesses. And as part of that, we have about 1,600 state and local chambers of commerce, like the New Jersey Chamber, who are our partners in our advocacy efforts. Most of our businesses, just like a cross sample of America's business. Most of our businesses are small businesses. And it is so great to just give a little bit of a snapshot of what we see happening in small business, and then kind of focusing on what 2025 has in store for the advocacy community. And I'll kind of close with a plea for businesses large and small, really to engage with you, Tom, and your team in how we can move public policy in the United States to benefit businesses, and in particular for your membership, Tom, to participate in the fly-ins. Holly and I know that when small businesses come to Washington, D.C., that's what really, really makes a difference on many of the things that we talk about. So we also survey. We haven't been surveying as long as NFIB has, though, that's for sure. We've been surveying for about 7 years with our partners, MetLife. And our latest survey shows a lot of what Holly was talking about, although it was right before the election. So we anticipate that our next survey is going to spike with small business confidence the way that NFIBs have. But we have kind of a nice snapshot of immediately before the election. And we saw some things that echo Holly Wade's observations. So the first is inflation. So we have the same findings that inflation is front and center on the minds of small business owners. And when you shift into what is our mandate as advocates in Washington, D.C., representing small business, our mandate, quite simply, is to slay the dragon of inflation. Now, the good news is we have a lot of fellow dragon slayers with us. I mean, if you look at the new president, new Republican House and Senate, if you kind of read between the lines in their pro-growth agenda, a lot of that has to do with trying to reduce inflation. I mean, energy dominance, for instance. There are a lot of us who believe with the type of leadership America could show in energy will quickly bring down energy prices, which is a huge deal when it comes to inflation. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that, but we're certainly off to a good start. Looking in my notes about other observations from our survey, one thing right before the election that is worth noting, because it does translate into some of our advocacy work now, and that was through the 4 years of the Biden administration, we saw a rising concern of the cost of federal regulation, the barriers that get in the way of growth, whether it's not being able to get a federal permit for something, or all of a sudden you have to worry about whether or not you are calculating your greenhouse gas emissions because you are a supplier for a Fortune 100 company, and the Securities and Exchange Commission is requiring for you as a supplier not even covered by the Securities and Exchange Commission, but just a supplier to someone who is under SEC's magnifying glass, you would have to calculate your greenhouse gas emissions. Now, luckily, that actually didn't become a rule, but it's that type of thing that small businesses were starting to get even more concerned about towards the end of the Biden administration. Our latest survey showed that 51% of small business owners believe specifically that federal regulatory burden is a barrier to growth. And most small businesses we work with want to grow, but there are barriers to that growth. One of those barriers was mentioned by Holly, and that is finding, attracting, and keeping really good employees. Holly and I agree that after we slay the dragon of inflation, we got a whole new dragon coming up behind it, and that is the dragon of a significant workforce shortage. Now, will artificial intelligence help? Yes, but it's not going to solve everybody's problems. I don't think artificial intelligence necessarily is going to help my friend Ian McLean, who runs a landscaping business down in Texas, the way it will, for instance, quantum computing on coming up with a cancer cure. So yes, artificial intelligence will help, but it's not a cure-all for our workforce challenges. And so we think that next dragon that we're going to have to try and slay is going to be taking on the workforce shortage challenge. So what about now? What about 2025? What about the 100 and so executive orders that all of us are busy reading to make sure we know how to translate those to our business members? Right now, here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we're focused on a pro-growth agenda. And specifically, our CEO, Suzanne Clark, who was a small business owner herself, she is laser focused on trying to get to a place of sustained 3% growth. Now, why 3%? Well, actually, we've been at between 2 and 3% for a while. And last year, I think we maybe finally got to the 3% growth rate. But the reason that 3% is important is because if you look at a baby born today, with 3% sustained growth, they'll be able to double their standard of living by their mid-20s. And then people kind of scratch their head and they're like, well, what's the big difference? 2%, 3%. Actually, a 1% difference at 2% growth, you don't get to double your standard of living if you were born today until your mid to late 30s. So that's the difference that a 1% difference makes. Now, what's behind this agenda of trying to get to a sustainable 3% growth? There's two things that we are really focused on in particular. One, Holly mentioned, that is extending, hopefully making permanent, the pro-growth aspects of the 2017 tax law. The one that is most important for small businesses is the 20% deduction that Holly referenced. I have some data unique to New Jersey. If you're wondering, well, how many businesses in New Jersey really care about this 20% deduction? Our data show that over 51% of employees in New Jersey work for a business that takes advantage of this 20% deduction. So when we were chatting in the green room before this webinar, we were talking about so what happens if that 20% deduction doesn't get extended? It's set to sunset at the end of this year. Well, what happens is all the employers that employ those over 51% of employees in New Jersey, a year from now, when they're starting to write that check to IRS, that quarterly check, estimated payments, they're going to see a tax hike between 25 and 35%. And then all of a sudden, these businesses start thinking, oh my gosh, where am I going to come up with 30% more taxes when I file my quarterly return a year from now? And that's where it gets really, really ugly. You start having to think about laying off people, trying like scaling back on investments, scaling back on providing what you would hope would be kind of a gold level plan for healthcare for employees so that you can attract and keep your best employees. It gets really ugly when you start thinking about everybody taking a 30% tax hike when you fill out your quarterly estimates in 2026. So that's what's at stake for this 20% deduction that small businesses now are able to take advantage of. If you can't tell, I get kind of a little bit caffeinated when we talk about this because the stakes are huge. Now, the good news is we have the House, the Senate, and the President of the United States all agreeing that this is important. That does not mean it's going to be easy. So Congressman Smucker from Pennsylvania, actually, he is in the Lancaster County area of Pennsylvania. He has legislation that he will reintroduce in this new Congress this week that makes that 20% deduction permanent. NFIB, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and lots of other business organizations are supportive of this, but that's what starts this process. And even though the House, Senate, the President of the United States are all aligned, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard. It is going to be hard because there are folks who disagree. There are folks who believe that every small business is a millionaire. And Holly and I were talking the other day about this great drywall a guy who hangs drywall up in Massachusetts, and he was laughing, not a funny laugh, but like an awkward laugh. Like, hey, my wife saw our tax returns and it looks like we're millionaires. And this is no different from any small business who files their taxes. On paper, it may look like you're a millionaire, but then when you start looking at the expenses and the investment that you've got to make to grow your business, take care of your employees, you're barely scraping by. And so there is this rhetoric by folks who don't want to extend these tax cuts, or they want to cap it at anyone who is making over $400,000, that have a very naive view of what it means to be a small business owner. And even a small business owner who on their taxes look as though they have over $1 million in assets, it does not mean they're millionaires. And that rhetoric of, oh, this is a tax cut for the rich starts to break down. And that's why it's so important that small businesses and large businesses come to Washington, D.C. and explain to members of Congress what it means and how important it is to extend these tax cuts and really to defeat the folks who have that false argument that this is only a tax cut for the rich, because it's not. It's tax growth for small businesses. So that is one kind of priority. The other priority is on regulation. And we have already seen, with less than 72 hours of a new president, we've already seen tremendous action in trying to push back against overregulation. Last year, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce filed lawsuits for over a dozen federal agencies saying they have exceeded their authority by imposing new regulations on small business. One that I actually enjoy mentioning is this criminalization of being an independent contractor, as though there is something wrong with being a 1099 independent contractor. The Department of Labor under President Biden tried to adopt the California rule, which is to say, no. It's much better to consider all these 1099s as employees of their largest clients, because we feel in our windowless office in a federal agency in Washington, D.C., we feel as though it's more fair for employees to get health care and benefits. And everyone that the business does contracting with should get those same types of benefits. That's better for America. That is baloney when it comes to small business. My wife, when she ran her own small business, she wanted to be her own business. She dreamt of the day where she would be able to say to potential clients, I'm sorry, but I don't have enough bandwidth or enough time. to service you as a client. I am going to devote my time to these clients. But she liked working 70 or 80 hours a week to be her own boss than she did to work 40 to 45 hours being a company's employees. And so for the federal government to say there's something wrong with that is actually, a stake in the heart of free enterprise as far as we're concerned. So we filed a lawsuit against Department of Labor on this rule. We feel as though when the Senate successfully defeated the PRO Act, which would basically unionize the entire private sector, when the Senate defeated that, we had a problem with Department of Labor going ahead and implementing it anyway. And so that's just one of 12 examples of when we filed lawsuits against agencies. And the Trump administration, the way they look at it is we shouldn't be issuing rules that end up with having the business community filing lawsuits. Like, that's just bad policy. And let's look at reducing regulation. I think President Trump now is tasking federal agencies for every one rule that you absolutely have to impose in the business community, you're going to take 10 off the books. That's a good start. And I think we'll see some progress. We are going to be walking shoulder with the president's team and trying to implement that requirement with federal agencies. And I think small businesses will breathe a sigh of relief. And we know that consumers and employees will see the value of their dollar increase at the grocery store when new federal regulations aren't upping the price at everything that we have to purchase, and which is driving inflation. So we are certainly committed to working with the administration because of that pro-growth aspect of deregulation. I'll say one last thing that I want to make sure, Tom, that your businesses, all the businesses tuned in today know we want to be a resource for all of you. Now, if you are really nerdy and you want the latest small business data and you want to check in with me and Holly every week, we want to answer those questions. So our information is on our website every week. If you Googled Small Business Outlook, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, you'll find a weekly conversation between me and Holly and the latest small business data. So that's for those of you who are real nerds out there, want to know the latest small business data, we encourage that. For everyone else who just wants tools, tips, and information about how to hire employees, what do some of the new tariff policies mean to small businesses, other things, I would encourage the use of our small business digital platform that I know the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce are big fans of. It's called CO, C-O. And if you Googled CO, Small Business, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, up pops a website with tons of information. And most importantly, that information is straight from the minds and voices of small businesses. It isn't me telling small businesses what to do. I'm not a small business owner. I'm a small business advocate. This digital platform called CO addresses many small businesses' challenges through the narrative, stories, and experiences of other small business owners. It's there for everyone to use. I know the New Jersey Chamber is a big promoter of this, but that type of tool is only as good as the people who actually use it. So I encourage folks to access that website, check it out, and hopefully it'll be good information for you to use. I'll hand it back over to Tom and his team at the New Jersey Chamber.
Thank you, Tom, and Holly, for those very enlightening comments about the big picture of business as it shifts from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. One thing I would say is that everything you said is very encouraging, but in New Jersey, we have a state that is the most heavily taxed business state in the country and probably the most overregulated business state in the country when it comes to the regulations imposed on our business community. And we have a Democratic governor who's there for another year, who's been very enamored with the progressive side of the equation as opposed to the business side of the equation. So we are faced with all the hurdles that you talked about, which are the overreach that the Biden administration has put into play, the tax situation that is imposed on business, and basically what we're going to try to do, and we've already tried to do this, and we will kick it off today with an op-ed we're putting out, is to say there's a new sheriff in town. There's going to be new approaches to business. There's going to be an emphasis on deregulation. There's going to be an emphasis on growth. There's going to be an emphasis on what's going to help business. And we have to take all those words that are national, bring them to New Jersey, and turn them into action with a sense of urgency that we don't have right now. And that's going to be our major challenge in New Jersey. We don't have a Biden to Trump shift, which is a big help, but we do have a change in our governorship coming up this year, which if the right person comes into power in New Jersey, we could have a Biden to Trump shift, which would be wonderful. So we are faced with all the issues you talked about. I'm very glad that nationally, Holly, from your surveys, there's an optimistic approach out there, and uncertainty is down, although not as much as it should be. But we still have a lot of work to do in New Jersey. And hopefully what's going on nationally will start to seep into our state and seep into it quicker than would normally be the case. So big challenges here, but I think with what's going on in Washington, we have some optimism that we can leverage that and make some real change here in our state, because our business community has been really downplayed for 7 years, and it's a state that has enormous economic potential that we need to find a way to unleash. So let me say that, Kevin, do we have questions that we can pose to Holly and Tom?
Yes, we do. First one is from Ferlanda up in Newark. Ferlanda Nixon. Does NFIB collect information unique to minority and women-owned businesses? If not, would you consider doing so?
So we do have in our Problems and Priorities survey, this last publication that we released this summer, the publication that we every 4 years update. And we did section out the ranking of problems and the change from 4 years ago of women small business owners. So we did section out women small business owners to see if there was a difference in the set of severity of problems, challenges that face women small business owners compared to the population. So we did do that. Certainly open to projects on looking at specific types of small businesses, but that's one that's been produced, and it's on our website, nfib.com.
You know, let me add to this too. So we also broke down by gender. And what we saw actually over the last 7 years is really interesting. So the male-owned businesses were a little bit more erratic up and down on the trend lines. Women business owners were a little bit smoother. The trends were the same. So the optimism, the concern with inflation and things like that, those actually were the same. But the women business owners' attitudes towards different changes were smoother than male-owned businesses.
We have a question from Jared Miller, who is saying, how do you or how will you support businesses who rely on those employees who will be potentially deported, landscapers, contractors, etc.? Like, have your organizations put any thought to that?
Kevin, and thank you, Jared. Yeah, we put a ton of thought into it. So let me start with our position on workforce challenges related to immigration. Suzanne Clark has been very blunt that we need to double the number of legal immigrant workers in the United States to keep up with the demand for businesses that want to grow and scale. Now, if you kind of parse out exactly what I said, you'll notice I did kind of overemphasize the term legal. That's a really important part of our position. We do not support businesses doing illegal things. And to the extent that businesses want to access the different visa programs, we have long-standing relationships, both at the local chamber, state chamber level, as well as service organizations that help businesses secure different, J1 visas, A visas, B visas, ranging from our friends who run a ski in, ski out property rentals in Utah, all the way to our landscapers in Texas and the landscape supply team down in Jacksonville, Florida. All of those are affected by different types of visa programs, and we help those businesses access those visa programs. But again, I'll emphasize that's helping businesses work through the legal mechanisms to bring in foreign workers. We do not support businesses doing things illegally or relying on anything that would be illegal, including bringing in employees.
Similar sentiment, enhancing the legal process of immigrants coming to the U.S. We know that obviously it's a tight labor market. This is a huge challenge for small business owners, especially in specific industries. And so broadening the legal capacity of immigration into the US and having small business owners have better access to those programs is hugely important. We haven't had kind of real dialogue in DC on immigration since the early 2000s, 2006, 7. That was the last time that it was a real robust conversation about immigration. So, it's an area that we pay a lot of attention to, and again, enhancing those programs and then also making them more accessible to small business owners.
Tom, those are all the questions in the chat.
Okay, a couple of things I would ask of Holly and Tom. You talk about inflation being a major impediment, and the Fed has an influence in that, and they're saying that their metrics are not continuing to decline, so that rates will not drop as fast as they would normally like them to do. And that's an issue also that you mentioned, Holly, that the cost of borrowing is high. And then the president now is talking about increasing tariffs, which will probably also impose higher costs on businesses, which could translate to higher inflation. How do you process high interest rates, the Fed slowing down from interest rate declines, the high inflation we already have, the imposition of tariffs? How does that all work out to the benefit of business, or will it?
So this is where it's not a straight road in DC, that there are going to be a number of obstacles, hurdles to navigate through. We know that tariffs impact small businesses, negatively impact them. We knew that from 2000, I believe it was 18, when there were tariffs imposed on imports from China, Mexico, and Canada. And those businesses that, relied on those products for their supplies and inventories. It was a challenge, and it included supply chain disruptions because of the tariffs. So we know that it impacts small businesses. We don't have a clear picture of kind of where this is going, if this is negotiating tactics, how this is going to play out. So there's a lot of talk, a lot of trying to figure out how this will go forward in the next number of months in 2025. So we're paying close attention. But again, it's hard to kind of navigate through the talk about it and where it's going, the negotiating tactics possibly versus actual implementation and what that implementation might look like, whether it's more targeted and strategic or more blanket across the board. So it's something that, we're still certainly paying attention to, but we know it impacts small business owners, especially in those, in certain industries that would be more dominant in having them rely on these products for their business and supplies and inventory. And we also know that for small business owners, it is a challenge. It's not easy finding new suppliers if there are other alternatives. Small business owners are busy running their business. And so a lot of the tactics that larger businesses might be able to afford in figuring out ways to navigate some of these tariffs, it would be a huge challenge for small businesses to do the same.
Yeah, Tom, I'll only add, this reminds me, you threw a lot at us, which I think shows a lot of the concerns and anxiety that businesses legitimately have. And I generally approach it the same way as that old adage, how on earth do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time.
Well, I want to we like to stay to our allotted time. We're approaching an hour. I would say, Holly and Tom, we really appreciate your perspective. I'm very encouraged by the optimism that you're saying is out there nationally. Our challenge in New Jersey is to take that national optimism and have it become optimism in our state. I would tell you that right now it is not that way, and we need to turn the tide and get it that way. And I think help working with both of your organizations and being aggressive as we approach our new governorship, we might be able to turn the tide and get there. We're looking forward to doing that. So really appreciate your perspectives. Thank you for working with us, and thank you for always being there when we have needs, and we look forward to having you back again. And Tom, to your issue of fly-ins always help in DC, I would just mention that the biggest fly-in in the country is happening February 6th and 7th. We have our Walk to Washington fly-in where we have around 1,000 people coming to Washington via Amtrak and other modes of transportation to meet with our congressional delegation, to meet with our gubernatorial candidates, and it's a unique opportunity for people to get together and network. And we encourage people on this call who are not signed up to sign up. There is still room for that, although it's dwindling by the minute. And if you have any information or need any information, go to our website and it's all there. And we highly encourage people to take part in this. It's probably the biggest networking event in the country, and it's a very unique opportunity to meet very high-level people who you normally would not have the opportunity to meet. So please take advantage of that. And we look forward to that event again on February 6th and 7th. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Holly, very much for participating today. Thank you to NJM Insurance. Thank you, Eileen, for being a great partner. And thank you for everybody joining in today. And we hope you got some good information. So have a great day and stay warm.
Thanks, Tom.